All right. Hello, everybody. We're back. I guess this is episode 4, if we're counting episodes. I'm Michael. We got a new platform today. We've got some kind of exciting news. I don't know if all that. I don't know what the deal is when we want to announce that, but we'll figure it out. But we're using a little bit of a new service here. This is our third service in streaming service in a month's time. So hopefully this one sticks. But joining me today, you can see in the upper right-hand corner is Jason from Ohio, and we've got Jack from Delaware, and Ken's not with us today. He said he's got a date, so
Oh man.
he's out doing stuff that's, I guess, more important than turtles, but I don't know. We're gonna have to give him a hard time about that. But so we are all super excited about this episode today. And this is, I think we've talked the most about this one. There were texts going back and forth on our group chat we're so hyped for this and excited. Today we're going to be talking about we've got Terence Rogers from Tertalia on Instagram joining us today from Australia. And we're going to be talking about one of the most interesting groups of turtles. We're going to be talking about the Australian turtles. And I think in the U.S. at least, a lot of the times they're typically not a group of turtles you talk about that frequently, and we're talking more about the cryptodiars, the hidden neck turtles. But Australia is really unique because all the turtles except for one on the whole continent are the pleuridiars, so the species that pull the neck sideways, or snake necks, short necks. But it's a whole, and it's very diverse. I mean, it's mid 30s, upper 30s species wise, so similar to US diversity, but it's all a whole different group of turtles. So we're just super hyped to have Terence on. So welcome, Terence.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I look forward to talking about it. Hopefully I can live up to all the hype.
Yeah, no, it's going to be good. So
yeah.
So I guess the first question we always have is kind of what got you into turtles? That's sort of always the first one we get asked. I'm sure you get this one a ton, but just why turtles?
Yeah, so originally my dad's side of the family, they're from country New South Wales, and I'm from Sydney, New South Wales. Grew up here my whole life. But yeah, dad's side of New South Wales. When I was younger, maybe 2 or 3 years old, we were driving on a holiday, going up to see the family, and along the road, long neck turtle, a Chelodina longicollis, and we just picked it up, not knowing, that it was illegal or anything like that. Took it home, and it all just sort of started from there. We pretty early on, we only had sort of that long neck, and maybe found one other for a few years, but quickly learned that you needed a license and you needed to do things properly. So yeah, we got the license, and the collection sort of started there. And luckily, we met a good friend of ours, Michael, pretty early on when we were keeping turtles. He was selling a few Macleay River turtles, Emydura and Chelodina, and they were ones that we were interested in because they were particularly small, Emydura, one of the smallest in Australia, and we got talking to him and been very good friends since. Done all our turtle trips together and everything. So yeah, and that's sort of how it started. And from there, we kept meeting people, and the collection kept growing. Started off with 1 pond and 2 tanks, I think, and now we're at 14 tanks and 6 or 7 ponds. And if it wasn't for my mum and my sister, it'd be even more, I think.
That's great. Everyone in the house has got to be interested in the turtles. It sounds like. I think we can all relate to that to some extent. We've kind of taken over some portion of the house with our kind of captive animals, I guess.
A lot of our my work with turtles and stuff like that originally and still to this day has been mostly captive, husbandry, keeping of things. I've spent like that, but it's only been limited because I've been either in school or studying at university, not really having a chance to spend much time on turtles, doing turtles, things like that. But that'll change from now. And more work can be done, particularly on the scientific side, which is what I have an interest in.
So you just finished up. I guess you were telling us a little bit about some of the work that you were doing at university. I guess that's pretty interesting. Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I'm doing my master's at the moment. I'm at the tail end of that. I look at toxic algae or potentially toxic algae, which is cyanobacteria. It's actually a bacteria, not an algae, but a bacteria that can photosynthesize and thus create its own energy. They've been around for millions and millions of years. Some say the building blocks of life. But yeah, they're a fascinating group, and I get the privilege to study them and look at how, in particular, I look at how nutrients affect their growth. So nitrogen, phosphorus in the Murray River. So one of our iconic rivers has been heavily dammed and weird, and things like water's slowed down, and as a result, those conditions are now ideal for toxic algae to grow. So yeah, we were just looking at trying to understand how it's growing in these weir pools and how it's getting to toxic levels for my master's, and I've just finished a big report for a government body and hopefully finish my whole thesis soon. So yeah, interest in rivers goes across from algae to turtles. Oh, he's dad as well.
Oh, there we go. So yeah. So I guess we can. So we didn't say this, but so I guess Terence's dad was going to join us midway through, and we had some technical difficulties. So that midway through is sort of at the beginning, but that's awesome. So
yeah.
But
he'll join in a second.
All good, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's got to give you an interesting perspective, kind of working with the microbial aspect of things on keeping turtles, but just kind of in general. Kind of, have you applied that sort of to like captive the work you do, or that's kind of separate, I guess?
My work is very much because of the aspect that I look at how nutrient dynamics within the river affect the phytoplankton dynamics, in particular so unique to the system, unique to the features of the river, of the lake, that nearly every system is different, and in captivity, algal species and things like that, even in captive environments are more than likely going to be different because the conditions are just not conducive for their growth. We have different non-toxic types of cyanobacteria in tank environments, but that's something that I've spent a bit of time research but not really found much information. There's a lot of people who are the extent of saying, oh yeah, I've got a cyanobacterial toxic algae bloom in my tank, but I could never ever find any information. That's sort of where people's understanding stops, and I've spent time trying to look into it and things like that, but maybe I haven't dug hard enough. but that's certainly something I'm gonna look or want to look at future, now that I've got a bit of now that I've got skills with identifying algae and cyanobacteria, and I've got a bit more of an understanding of what strains or what certain species of cyanobacteria might. But yeah, it's cool to in our ponds out the back see the just the common green algae that I see out in the river. Seeing that in the ponds and things, it's pretty interesting. But yeah, the implications of my research aren't really they're not able to really be transferred that much to captive sort of settings or environments like that.
Yeah. The one of the only
still important.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here he is.
Oh, there we go.
I should do this as well. That should go in your left ear.
Oh, nothing ever stays in my ear.
It'll work.
Go, fellas.
Hi.
Oh, I can hear you. Sorry, I've just raced from work. I've got to earn money to feed the habit. I haven't become a turtle millionaire yet.
Yeah.
Do you guys know any?
I wish.
I can only Eric Good. Eric Good comes to mind, but I think that's pretty much it. But yeah. Well, it's great to have you on, and both of you guys. This is going to be awesome. Thanks for sitting down with us, and we're just really excited to talk. We're all from United States, so we're certainly interested in Australian turtles, and I think kind of our a lot of our knowledge has come from the 2017 Turtles of Australia book that is, I mean, literally the Bible of Australian turtles. And I'm sure you guys have there you go. And I've heard that you guys have had you guys know John Cann and have had some adventures.
Yeah, we have a lot of contact days. Help each other out with a little bit. He might not realize it, but he helps us a lot more than we help him. A lot of knowledge.
Yeah, we in terms of things, we haven't really done much with him, but spent a lot of time with him, talking, chatting. Spent time at his house. Could spend a treasure trove.
I'm scared we're never going to get all the information that he's got in his head. We're never going to hear it all.
Yeah,
but that sounds bad. But it's got a fork in it, in not necessarily that order.
So I'm in California, and I do work with the pond turtles, and I learned recently that he had actually been to the spot where I do pond turtle work, which is kind of interesting. But I'm curious, do you guys know how he got all the photos for the Turtles of Australia book? Because I mean, that book, in terms of turtle photos, is the most incredible sort of, I guess, array of, in terms of the size of the book and everything. But were those in tanks, or I mean, that's.
Actually, I don't mean to interject. I actually have a decent bit of input there, because Maurice Rodriguez. Do you guys know him or heard of him?
Name's familiar.
A little bit familiar, yeah. Rodriguez.
Yeah, he's like omnipresent in the turtle world, but he's always there. He somehow has connections with everybody, but he still has apparently a lot of the pictures from that book were taken at Bill McCord's turtles, and apparently like they just disassembled that tank a couple years ago, but yeah, that's like a lot of the pictures they were in the same tank. It's just they would take different turtles in, but not the wild pictures obviously, but like the cover photo and all of that. Those are all captive turtles those are all Bill McCord's.
Yeah, we've researched a photographer here in Australia, Gunther Smeeder, who's very well known with wildlife, fish, aquatic life mostly, and fish, turtles, reptiles in general. But him and Can did a little bit together with photography, and John had a room set up and a lot of the photos that were his, but photos like that one on the front with the Irwin eye, were in a tank. Which way do I move it?
Yeah,
in a tank. In his, you've got a different cover. At John's place the other day, he showed me the book.
Oh, that picture.
It's a different cover for you guys, so you might not recognize that cover. He showed me your American copy.
I can.
Or the overseas copy. But Gunther showed us how he did his last year before he passed, and then John showed us how he did a lot of his photographs as well. And it's great setup. You wouldn't know, it looks fantastic, the photos, and been the same at Bill's place too. I think they all use the same formula of setting up the tank, getting nice depth of the photo, taking the photos through the glass. I don't know anything about photography, but
Gunther even I think Gunther has a book or a little like a guide to how he does his photography, and he, the certain light setups and different angles of lighting and things like that. But yeah, there's some of Gunther's books on freshwater fishes and things are just the shine that he gets from some of the rainbow fish and stuff like that is just amazing. It's hard to comprehend.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that there was. I mean, it's just that book. I don't know if there's any figures on how many pictures are in there, but just a lot of the older turtle books. Typically, it's kind of a lot of text, which is great, obviously. But then there's sort of a section of plates, and there tend to be not maybe the best photos, but the Turtles of Australia it's absolutely incredible, honestly. Kind of the variation that he demonstrates in so many photos and sort of, I guess the just the amount of photos within it is incredible. So I guess if you guys just want to sort of Australian turtles, typically I've found that a lot of people don't really know sort of how many species exist in Australia. I mean, certain long neck species, broad shells come to mind, and eastern long necks. We've got a lot in sort of the captive trade here. But in terms of the overall diversity, there's a lot that people that are just kind of generally into turtles might not even know about. So I don't know if you guys want to give kind of a rundown on some of the species that you guys keep, but also have sort of had experience in the wild with, and just kind of showcase sort of the diversity in terms of species.
Well, interestingly, a lot of the species that are popular overseas are ones that are harder to find here. So, species like subglobosa, they're not very popular here. Even still, now they're becoming more popular. And
the people would like to have subglobosa, I think, because they're attracted to the colouring, but in most states won't allow them to be kept that easily.
There's yearly requirements for, update, like going up into a second class of license. Yeah, not many people are to move up into different classes. They just sort of get the class 1 license and keep what they can. And species like Walleyurina and things like that, I see more so overseas and see virtually none of here in Australia, particularly in the captive sort of sphere. But yeah, what other species?
The things that aren't known much about overseas. We've got two of the, I don't know what you've covered before I got here, two of the monotypic genus turtles, which is the Fitzroy River turtle. The Mary River turtle, well, they're both very different in that respect, because the Mary River turtle was so widely kept in the 70s and 80s because they were harvested by a particular group up on the Mary River in southeastern Queensland, and they were sold to the pet trade. And in those days, turtles were just called the penny turtle in Australia. because they were small, and while they were small, so they just called a penny turtle because they lived for a few years and then they died because they're kept in a fish bowl or something. So Mary River turtle, which is a beautiful and very unique turtle and an endangered species now.
There we go. He's got it.
Yeah, Marys are quite. Oh yeah, it's letting out water. Marys were sort of widely kept, but they aren't now. So the people that had them in those days, we had a friend down in Melbourne who had one from those days. Just kept for 20 years or 30 years or what, 30 or 40 years or whatever it was. So they were Mary River turtles, while rare in captivity here. Well, in New South Wales, they're a class 1 animal, which people don't really know. Class 1 reptile, I mean. So they sort of can be kept easily, but they're really not available. We've got one mate in Brisbane who breeds them now, and that's about it in Australia, I'd say. We've got a few adult, sub-adults out there. Oh yeah, Terence is.
What is the class 1? I'm not familiar with sort of the Australian kind of.
So statewide laws. So I think you've got different state regulations there too. So the class 1 in New South Wales just means the common things like Emydura, Macquarie eye. I think Terence said one of you guys have got Macquarie eye. But we so the more common species, but it's so outdated, the system, that things like Mary River turtle, Cooper in captivity, the tropical in Northern Territory, the dentata, are still a class 1 animal in New South Wales. That's in New South Wales, but in some other states, things can be kept without license, and then some of these things we're showing you now are allowed to be kept with a license, the lowest level license. We have what's called, we're talking to licensing. What's a class allows, it's called class 2 non-venomous. So we can have any of the next listing of reptile critters that are not venomous. So it opens up to a lot of the snakes and lizards and things that you couldn't have on a class 1. We don't have many other. We used to have quite a few lizards as well, but down to just a shingleback now.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of Marys, Mary River turtles, I know Michael wanted to see a captive one. This is our first Mary that we ever got, maybe as a baby,
10 or 11 years old.
10 or 11 years ago. It's got this one's interesting. It was very pale on the underside growing up, much like that. Yeah, put it in. The coloration is quite different in these two, on the plastron and growing up. The bigger one was always like that little one. It was that sort of golden yellowish sort of color along the bottom there till we put it. And I think some of the like pelleted food in our feeding that we give is like a barramundi or some type of
trout
fish,
and barramundi.
Trout and barramundi, like fish food. That was just one of the pellets we added into our mix, and I reckon something in that pellet may have brought out this sort of golden color in the turtle. I know on my turtle page, on my turtle Instagram page, Tertalia, there's a few good photos of it when it was bright, sort of golden colored. And yeah, it was quite striking. It was pretty amazing. But yeah, they're a cool turtle. They have the obvious bubbles down the bottom there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that I can't quite tell from the video, but I know some of the males get massive tails, like to the point where.
Yeah, so this one is a male. He's only young, and by young, like 10 is very young for them. So I give you a bit of a reference, my index finger, sort of similar length. If you'll pull it
That's
out,
still pretty. That's a pretty big tail. Like, I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, the adult
Yeah.
males, their sexual dimorphism is they're one of the few where the male in Australia, where the male, or the only, I think, where the male turtle will be bigger than the. Don't let him do anything on your laptop. And he bigger than the male.
Yeah, for aquatic
yeah.
turtles, it tends to be the other way around.
Yeah, the other monotypic genus dry river turtle, which is just really not kept in. It's not in captivity in Australia much at all. But again, the same mate. In Brisbane has bred them recently.
Yeah.
But we got those last year. Well, nearly a year ago, and they're quite unique turtles. Which is you always hear the story. I think Steve Irwin sort of love Australia, and these two are the ultimate in that respect. So we filmed. I'll try and find it one. Filmed out in the wild up in the Gulf country in Queensland. So from the point coming down on the left, that's the Gulf country they call it, and I lifted the snapper out of its head out of the water, and you see the cloaca up, and then it pulled its head under, and the cloaca opens up. So up and down, I was doing that, so you can follow it with the GoPro. It's not very professionally filmed. I had goggle and snorkel, and I was trying to do it and trying to see if its head is above the water, and the camera's moving everywhere. But it's quite interesting to see. Might do it out here in the pond one day with some of ours. But the ultimate in the black or respiring turtles is the Mary River turtle. Rely on that well oxygenated water to survive, and they'll be found below the riffle zones, fast water in the rivers where they exist. That's usually where they're found. I know our little Fitzroys will spend a lot of time. I never see them come up. I can sit there and stare at them for hours, but
they're a true walking turtle. They virtually never swim in the midstream at all. They're just, the whole time they spend is just walking along the bottom. If you spook them, they might jump forward a little bit, but they're either planted and half buried along the bottom,
or grab it.
Yeah, they're either just sitting perfectly still or walking along the bottom. And interestingly, I've actually got a bit of footage of it. I haven't put it up yet, but hopefully I'll put it up soon. I took a video of one of the babies when we first got it, and it was looking at the log, like one of the logs we just had in the tank, and it started walking up to it, and I thought, it's just gonna stay along the bottom, but it started climbing, and as it's climbing, it's being onto the log and walking, and you can see it's almost using its chin as well, and like the front of the beak, and it's latching on and walking like this with all four limbs, and it's fascinating. I've never seen anything like that. So and it started like scraping against the log, getting the algae off and things. So hopefully I'll release that video soon and you guys can see. But yeah, they're a fascinating turtle, like completely different to everything else we've seen and had. But yeah.
Someone was telling me about a video with the Rheodites, the Fitzroy River turtles. They had a feather, and someone took a video of it. It was taken in water, and they put the feather, and it would go in and out. And they put it might not in Australia. I don't know but here it's like it's like a little tune, and they made the tune to it, and the feather was going in and out.
Yeah,
I think I've seen that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, well, I'll include in the video a bit of footage of the sand underneath it just getting pumped every half a second. You can just see it, and you can see the turtle when it's, especially when you're going to catch it or you've just put it back a tank. It'll really pump the water through the cloaca, and it'll do it so much so that the back legs will be like that, and its bum's pointed up in the air, rocking back and forth, just pump water in and out of the cloaca. Dad's grabbed one of them,
shedding
at the moment, but
letting out all that water too.
Hold it like this. Show you up close. Rheodites Luke wide-eyed diver or translates to wide-eyed diver, and as you can see, or if you can see the really white distinct eye. Grab that.
Jag, were you trying to say something?
No, I'm just looking through.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at I'm just trying to like get close so I can see.
Yeah,
my screen.
I didn't realize that leucops. That makes sense though. That's very interesting.
I'm not sure which word, but they used to be called, one of the old names here used to be white-eyed river diver. That was the early name for them, and that's what the name means. I don't know if that's Latin. We have names for some of our turtles that are Greek and different languages, but they're scientific names. But it means white-eyed river diver, essentially. I should study that up a little bit more. But diver, I suppose, because they're always not really diving; they're just staying down there. But yeah, they're quite. Look, they're as Australian turtle. We have short-necked turtles and long-necked turtles as well, and these, in the scheme of things, have actually got almost a mid-neck, a mid-strength, a mid-length neck. Mid-strength, I'm thinking about beer. Well, we have beer in bottles here that they call long neck. So this is a mid. And the short, we used to have beer in bottles that they called stubbies.
That's
short necks. But so they're very cool turtle to have. Interesting the way, like the head, it's hard to, like Terence will put photos up. I don't know how to do Instagram and all that sort of stuff. But interestingly, the head, if you've watched the, what's the, dragons and everything show, the series, Game of Thrones, the dragons in Game of Thrones. I reckon if you look at the head and the neck, and the way this neck moves, it's got the head of a Rheodites, of a Fitzroy, can pivot close to the head at the top of the neck. It's hard to see it there, but it's got an unusual bend and none of our short neck or long neck species seem to be able to do. They've got a general sort of a bend in the neck. I don't know all the correct terminology for it, but they are quite unique. It's just one of those little things sort of notice when you stare at them a few hours a day.
Yeah, are you comparing it to the dragons in Game of Thrones?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. You have a look at that. I'll send you. Terence will do some photos for you of those up close and some of the adults that we've seen.
I wonder what the.
Yeah. Oh, it's quite amazing.
I wonder why the Fitzroys sort of can pivot like that at kind of the atlas, the vertebra. That's kind of interesting.
It would be interesting to see. I'll talk to John about it too, and just scenes of them. They're rare to see. Period. I don't think they're seen that often. So. Finding some skeletal remains would be interesting to see.
Into yet, but it'd be know what it was like, what that connection is like in the upper neck there, because they're very insectivorous, whatever and macroinvertebrates and things down in the rocks. So potentially having that ability to move their head and pivot it a little bit more in these little rock crevices allows for them to get down deeper. And one thing that's interesting that you'll see on the turtle is that its beak is quite pointed. See if I can show you that, but yeah, they've got quite a pointed sort of.
On the camera.
Hard to do, but yeah,
Maybe
you can see in photos.
Oh, yeah.
But
camera quality.
It's quite pointed. It's a bit hard to see.
It's quite
Video
unique.
quality.
It's the only thing that's remotely similar is the Mary River turtle. There's not a real, there's not that closely related, not that closely, not that similar really, but the more similar than any of our other Australian turtles. But what was the question again, Michael? Sorry, am I getting names right? Michael, Jack, and Jason. Yeah. What was the question? Some of the other things that we have here in Australia.
Less common, or that are less common. The belli. Yeah, so the Mykelys. So we've got a few of those species from that genus. Yeah, I've got a few of them down here as well that I can show as well. But yeah, the belli are a few years now. That friend I told you about before, Michael, had adults for years and years and years, and was actually able to breed them maybe 10, 12, 10, 11 years ago, and we got a lot of those offspring and just grew them up slowly, and now they're getting to mature size. So it'll be interesting to see, till they're able to breed, what they're like, what age they are able to breed when they're mature and things like that. So it'll be the main sort of population of belli, which are in New South Wales, but there is also a disjunct population in southern Queensland, up in Girraween National Park, Bald Rock Creek, sorry, and commonly called Bald Rock Creek turtles. But yeah, in the book, John mentions how they're different and notes that they're morphologically different. Stuff by others sort of have scrutinized that and sort of said, they're likely not to be different, but yeah,
genetically the same, both populations. It's just very slight, morphological differences in some of the detachment in size we've noticed too. Have friends involved in the work up there now too, in government, like project there with the turtles. They're in decline, the species up there, because of there's blindness in in some of them. We'll send a photo later too. Do you have this on Facebook, or that's the only thing I know how to do? I can add photos if it was on Facebook, but why are you laughing at me, mate?
Yeah, we can all exchange social media.
Yeah, just the blindness, cataracts that exist there, and that happens in another population of sawshell of Latisternum, same genus turtle, not too far away as well. So it's which is a little bit sad, but yeah, the predation, nest predation, all sorts of things are impacting those guys, foxes mainly.
Yeah. The main thing that they're finding, that they have found, was that competition has driven the Mykelys belli to the sort of upper reaches of these systems. So there's rivers like the Guida River and the Namoy and McDonald rivers and things like that, where in New South Wales where they're found, but they're upstream of waterfalls and things like that, or big dam impoundments. And yeah, the Emydura that are, you know, must have been native to much of the basin, and you know, further down there just slowly have, you know, outcompeted these turtles and driven them upstream. And you know, there's these pockets remaining in the upper reaches of these streams, but there's no crossover, there's no genetic introgression by other catchments. So
there's only one section of their range, one river, where they cohabit, like they're together. So, and they seem to I don't know how much you can read into it, but the belli there look smaller than the populations. They look reasonable there. It's fairly large in that area.
So they're actually introduced. Macquarie are
in the river lower reaches of those rivers. So this is western flowing. We've got in New South Wales, in Eastern Australia, we've got the Great Dividing Range, and sometimes we talk about eastern flow. So that's from the Great Dividing Range to the sea, and western flow, which is going out to marshes and things into the West Country, out into the plains. So this is western flow. So this is the Murray-Darling system. And up in other lower parts of the Murray-Darling, it's full of Macquarie. That's Emydura Macquarii, also where the top location, the name comes from. So yeah, they are there. They're native to that area, but they're obviously moving up. They're the sort of you know, like they're a native turtle. They're not the red-eared slider of Australia, because they're native turtle and they're just doing what they do, and that's the way they operate. They're a voracious feeder, and they obviously do better than the belli in those areas. So we haven't known enough for so many, haven't studied enough. The turtle, you know, it was belli was one of the earlier turtles to be named in Australia. In the 1800s, early to be found, but then so much going on with the names relating to latosternum and all sorts of things. But I don't think we know enough about their range for long enough to be able to tell how much that interaction faster than we think they are.
Yeah. It's also interesting that the Emydura up in those northern rivers of the Murray-Darling Basin are morphologically quite different to the southern Emydura Macquarii. To say that, you know, potentially, you know, the Macquarii were only endemic to the lower parts of the Murray-Darling Basin and they've slowly moved up is one thing, but then you'd assume whatever's there would be similar to what's moved, or what they actually do look quite different. And there's, you know, that sort of region of northern New South Wales, southern Queensland is quite a wet region in parts, but it's also sort of unknown in areas as well. You know, people, you know, not really going, you know, people do a study, and because things are still Emydura Macquarii, they'll go straight to the Murray, or, you know, parts of the Murray where there's heaps of them. And then, you know, this catchment is a huge catchment. It's the width of New South Wales, the length of New South Wales. You know, there's turtles up there that, you know, might not be looked at in depth, or might be just, you know, not considered. I think there's been some guys who have looked at, you know, the Emydura up in those reaches, but only as, you know, collateral in their studies, just, you know, as a number, not as the actual target.
Right on. What's been your experience like with the Emydura Macquarii, like in captivity? Like, how long have you been working with them? Like, how do you set them up, or can you speak to that perhaps?
Yeah. So we had a few early on of the sort of pure Emydura Macquarii, but because they're turtle that grows quite large. We sort of became interested in the eastern flowing Emydura macquarii species. So as Dad was saying just before, east of the Great Dividing Range, we have lots of catchments, and in each of those catchments, there's differ ever so slightly, and they were sort of the one that we were more interested in. So Emydura macquarii, Durra, the Macleay River turtle is one that we were interested in early on. So we mainly kept them. In terms of setting up husbandry, tanks like that. Tanks.
Should I go and get one so Jason can see it?
Yeah. In terms of setting them up and everything to keep, all the basics. There's nothing in particular, when it comes to water quality that I would say you need to look at. We keep most of our tanks and I know the river from doing my research and stuff like that. That the water quality is pretty sound. The pH sort of stays around 7. If anything, goes a bit higher to high 7s. It's not that saline in parts for most of it. Temperature wise, they're able to cope with pretty cold temperatures. Down to 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but they're quite a hardy turtle, and in Australia they're very common in the captive sphere. It's cool to see them overseas. And one thing I've noticed as well with a lot of Australian turtles is many of the species overseas have a slight look to them that's not normal, or it makes it hard to pick. Turtles have been plucked from 2 different areas, and they're offspring of turtles from 2 different areas. But it's hard to really know, and a lot of stuff that has gone overseas. The old townships in areas that were more popular. That I know in Northern Territory and parts of the Kimberley and old towns that people collected animals from, that lives in a just land that's left and managed by Indigenous. The Emydura macquarii are a cool species. It's cool to see them overseas.
Definitely. It's kind of interesting too, because I think you were talking about this earlier, but the subglobosa are not super common in Australian collections, but they're really common over here. And then kind of the opposite with the macquarii. Because over here in the States, not a whole lot of people have them, especially compared to the subglobosa, but you see them all online over in Australia. So it's interesting, because it was the 80s when Australia banned import and export. So it's interesting to see how that's kind of affected the species available for the private sector.
That's it. Yeah. It's fascinating. It's the amount of subglobosa that are overseas is just astronomical, and it's pretty interesting to see how people relate the Emydura subglobosa to Australia and areas as such, when the population here is tiny. There's a couple hundred individuals in one little section of the Jardine River up right on the tip, and it's and including in Australia, a lot of the subglobosa here are actually from overseas. They would have come from America, probably. A few may have come straight directly from Papua New Guinea, but I'd say most of our captive, all of ours, are what I would think as Emydura subglobosa. In of late, there's actually been a description for the Australian population, Emydura subglobosa ankybania, I believe it's pronounced, and that subspecies, it was described by Ian Smales and McCord and John Cannon stuff, and they found some pretty interesting about our Australian populations. That showing they are distinct in certain aspects. The Australian ones will have a dark sort of horseshoe shape below the jaw. The bridges are particularly pale. There's no color, coloration, pink coloration on the bridges of the shell. The eye color is different as well. I believe more yellow in the Australian ones and Barbosa, but yeah, it's interesting. It's something that I enjoy, looking at those subtle differences in populations, and I am of that.
I'm colorblind, so I can't tell what he's looking at sometimes. I got him interested in turtles so he could tell me what color things are.
So one of the things that's really interesting about Australian turtles that I've been following along with a bit is the fact that there's so many. I mean, recently there's been descriptions of there's been sort of big taxonomic revisions of the southwestern longnecks, but there's 2 new species that a lot of people, I think, just in general haven't heard of. The I don't know if it would be the Darwin longneck, the Carico Pongo.
Yeah.
And then also the Emydura Gunalini.
You can go and get one of those too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then also the Emydura Gunalini too. A lot of people probably don't even know about the Gunalin's long neck turtle, but now there's a Gunalin short neck turtle too. So this is so interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I'll get onto that. Right before we get onto that topic, though, we'll just go back to Emydura again. The Maclays.
Two of the Maclay. Which way do I go? That way.
Yeah, that way.
These are 2 of the Maclays that. So the female is actually quite a small one. I picked these 2 out because it shows the differences, particularly for you, Jason. The differences with your quite fair and more rounded, where these more ovate shape and quite dark. Like the plastron is very dark relative to the common Macquarii and indeed all other Macquarii in Australia. So they're unique. They're quite popular in captivity in Australia because they're the smallest of one of the smallest of the Emydura, and they're so relatively easy to keep. I like the ones I fell in love with early. I like the colour in the colourful sort of eye they have too. So it's quite attractive even to colourblind people. But
particularly in wild
this is a fairly small females. Normally they get a little bit bigger, and this is quite an average size. He's shedding at the moment too. Average size male. You can see obviously the tail difference in the tail there too. She's not relaxing much. But this is our smallest female, but she's mature. She's bred. She came from John Cann, actually, this girl. But but that's why they're popular in Australia. Beautiful turtles. Some of our other ones are fairer than this. Plastron is a lot fairer than that.
An interesting thing about the Maclays as well is John Cann also spent a lot of time with up on the Maclay River and in parts, and he's got a few friends who are up on the river there, and what he noted was that one of the tributaries running into the Maclay, which was George's Creek, which was the creek that ran through his friend's property. He noted that population of turtles was distinctly smaller main channel. And I'm yet to go and ask him about that and chat to him about, but something I definitely want to look into and look at. And a lot of John's turtles would have been well before it was illegal to take things and stuff like that. And it's very likely that this turtle was one of those from that creek. Seeing how small it is, it's quite small. That's my hand behind it. It's no bigger than my hand. 15 centimeters or something, and it's sexually matured. It's quite old. You can tell by the sort of roughness to it, I guess.
Mm.
But yeah, and John said he knew in his ponds for 20 years or 30 years or something. So God knows how old this turtle is. But
the interesting thing, we'll get back to where we were before, but
Yeah.
the interesting thing with the Macquarie eye in Eastern Australia is that the most recent taxonomic revisions of really an exercise in lumping. So all of these, this is just Emydura Macquarie eye in the listing, ICZN listing. No references to subspecies. So we really, I suppose they're only recognised by a common name. I don't understand the need to not have subspecies based on morphology. Genetically, they're identical to the Western flow guys, which you've probably got, Jason. But we've got we haven't got, but we've had Kreft turtle, Macquarie eye before that are a lot bigger. Oh yeah, Terence is going to get the Cooper's Creek turtle, which is another one. It's still separated.
That's what I want.
We've got a real Cooper's Creek turtle fan.
Oh, did you want to see the Cooper?
Up in the right here, Jack.
Yeah, I love
waiting all along.
I'm excited to see this.
Yeah, there's a bit of water coming out of this girl. And this is the crankiest turtle. Well, I don't know about your alligator common snappers and things, but she's
good God. That turtle's
Oh man.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Look at that face.
A little bit cool straight out of the water, but yeah, she's
I had to keep her in water because I had to coax her out of the pond with food. So
she's killed one male. She doesn't.
Jeez.
She lives with
monster. Look at
lives with platysternum, with sawshell and albigula in the pond. But don't put it near my face.
sorry.
And she lives with them in the pond, and they're quite. Is that covering the microphone?
No.
Yeah, look at
But she's, I don't know, just particularly cranky. And
Yeah.
she killed one male, chased and killed. We do have a bigger one of her, like a bigger Cooper's Creek girl, but that one's not as cranky. You always get the cranky one when you put them on show. Years, don't you? Steve Irwin taught everyone over there what cranky means.
I find the megacephaly is like one of the most. It's interesting to me and how it's very similar to what you see in the map turtles over here. Like it's like even like morphologically, it's the skulls. It's almost like convergent, but the big difference, like the lack of the zygomatic arch in their skull, like the whole palate is like narrower on them. Like if you were to take like a barber's map turtle, the actual like maxilla is much wider.
Yeah.
And even though the actual head width is probably roughly the same, the mouth itself then the plates are going to be much wider. So it's just an interesting difference to me. But
yeah.
A lot of it's probably, what were you going to say about the food there? A lot of it's probably to do with what's their main food source. I mean, we've got our Victor Emydura in the tropical. We'll get that megacephalic the head, but that's more to do with the diet, as they don't start like that now. Our adults don't really have that activity, or if they don't really have, but they'll develop it in older age.
Yeah,
and these guys eat a lot of crustaceans, like yabby.
Bivalves and things like that. Yeah.
That's
crawfish.
That seems to be like the biggest factor, like contributing to that is like the diet, because you can I've even seen like turtles that are almost exclusively megacephalic in the wild, like a lot of map turtles and even some of the musk turtles, like American ones, and then you raise them in captivity and say you're not feeding them anything that's tough to crush or would stimulate the jaw muscles, and they just develop very small, narrow heads. While
do you know what their live diet is?
Sorry, what
their wild diet is? I mean,
are you talking about the map turtles and musk turtles?
Yeah.
it's largely snails and small mollusks, crustaceans too, but a lot of like smaller snails that are very thick shelled, and it takes a lot of effort to crush, and they have to crush lots of them. And it's like the repeated stress on the jaw muscles must trigger that growth and the growth of the bone with it after. And it must function in a similar way with the Cooper's Creek turtles and a lot of the other.
I remember, I think I've spoken to you before, Jack, about how that, potentially that macrocephaly might be genetically mediated, and I thought that was fascinating. I haven't looked into it any more than what we talked about, but it's definitely interesting. I recently just looking at the Emydura Gunaleni paper. In that paper, they sort of compared the skull caps of Warrelli and Subglobosa, and they noted that the skull cap was much more narrow in Warrelli. As you see wild ones that are really old that have macrocephaly, and virtually never or rarely ever see it in Subglobosa. As well as in that Emydura Gunaleni paper, they actually found an individual with a skull cap similar to the Warrelli in Australia, and it was smack bang in the middle of the Subglobosa distribution, and it was morphologically different as well. Going off on tangent.
I think Michael, James Terrell sent me that picture a little while back. I think it was a Subglobosa. It had a huge head, like massively expanded. I just don't see that very often. I don't know. There's just a random picture, and but it obviously, like, it looks like that. It looks like its head is just massive, and
I find it interesting how, like, when you look at Macquarie River turtles, generally they've got pretty narrow heads. And then you look, well, I guess the Amati, the Cooper's Creek turtles, it's somewhat debatable if they're Crefts turtles or Macquarie, but regardless, that whole group they maintain kind of these small heads, but then the Cooper's Creek ones, they must just have access to mollusks that the other ones don't, and they're just going to town. I thought it was the northern red-faced turtles. I think the western, the Australis, Emydura australis. In John Cann's book, there's a little anecdote in there. There's a creek up in the Kimberley region where there's somewhat kind of similar to map turtle undertones. He mentioned that the males stay really small and the females get big, and the females get really megacephalic, and that just reminds me of sort of our North American map turtles, like Jack was saying, but in that population. But then, like, when you look at the Cooper's Creek turtles, it's just so odd out of that group of turtles to see that. I don't know if you guys see that megacephaly in any other Macquarie subspecies or varieties.
The Kreft there, I mean, obviously, the Kreft turtle. I started with turtles when Terence was a little boy. I don't know if he told you about that, but the small, almost Maclay size that we just had before, and Fraser Island, completely separate population off the Australian mainland on the Sand Island, were called Fraser Island Crefts, and Cooper's Creek turtles were called Cooper's Creek Crefts, and all have that post-orbital head stripe, behind the eye. And as young, you see that particularly. They lose it with age, as does the Kreft. That's typical Kreft subspecies. But at those with age, we'll get, I don't know if you call it, it's a big head. So I suppose it's megacephaly.
I think that, I think they do. It's hard to know with older turtles that, their heads, their heads are getting bigger. Their heads are just getting bigger with age. But to know whether it's, really that macrocephaly, or whether it's just that's what they look like when they're that size, because you don't see that in the old that often. But yeah, it's interesting. The another thing is that in Australia, like unlike all the surveys and a lot of the work that's done in the US, there's a lot less of that being done here, and only in the last couple of years that more surveys are being done on wild populations, and we're understanding a bit more. I don't know if it's similar in the US, but yeah, it's just sort of our understandings are still growing as much as we know about things. You know, it's always adapting.
Yeah, the like everyone's, I think, pretty much a universal understanding of megacephaly is that it's like almost it's directly correlated with the diet. Like in some species, or that are really widely ranged, like the common musk turtle over here, you can find separate populations of them that there's almost no genetic difference at all. But one population's feeding on Asiatic clams or something, and they have massive heads. And then you have populations feeding in like on insects and like lentic bodies of water, and even in captive. I think it was Iverson that did this. He had like I think it was him who like raised a group of Odoratus like separate from each other, and specifically kept one group on like mollusks and tough-shelled organisms exclusively, and then kept the other group on soft-bodied organisms like throughout their developmental stages. And the adults that were feeding on hard-shelled organisms developed massive heads, and the ones that weren't, they didn't develop large heads. So it was pretty much, and they were both from the same, like they were like from the same clutch, like those turtles. So it seems to essentially be almost entirely a diet.
Yeah, diet dependent. Yeah. It's really
It's certainly cool. It's a frontier too. I think there might be some room for epigenetics work. That's kind of a newer field, looking at kind of how the environment actually kind of modulates genetic expression. One of the theories, there's a lot of different ways this can happen, but DNA methylation is when you add a methyl functional group to the DNA, and that can sort of like modulate the expression of certain regions of DNA, and that's expressed obviously in the proteins and how and sort of how the organism is, and if there's something sort of environmentally that's stimulating a change that's going to kind of I guess control the expression of a sequence over time, that could change how the organism looks. So it's kind of a crazy to think that actually in real time we might be seeing some genetic change that's not solely just plasticity, but like Jack's saying, it's correlated to diet. So something just kind of interesting to think about for future work, I guess, and why that is.
Yeah, it's fascinating to understand how quickly it's happening and things. It's really interesting.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that's sort of an interesting segue into the whole. One of the things I think about when I think about Australian turtles is sort of a turbulent taxonomy. I think that's certainly obviously that exists everywhere, and I think John Gray kind of screwed us up, and it's still we're feeling the effects of that 150 years later all over. But I mean, he did a lot of good too. But in terms of Australian turtles, I think it's kind of interesting. I'm curious what your guys' kind of opinion is, but there's a lot of species that are kind of based on morphology, which I think is certainly valid. Sometimes maybe species versus like an ESU or evolutionarily significant unit maybe would be useful to distinguish between that. But what do you guys think in terms of like species wise? Like, I guess that's sort of personal preference, but
yeah. Oh, we're both, being lovers of turtles, we both love to see the variation in everything. So, you know, within a catchment is variation, within a river variation. Like we were saying with the Macleays, is there variation in that little tributary, in that little creek? For me, recognizing these subtle morphological differences just are very interesting. I love that, and I love that. And so I'm always probably going to be of the opinion of, you know, making or, you know, subspeciating things at the very least to try and understand, you know, how they might differ. But yeah, in terms of like how descriptions have been done and you know, commenting on what I think has happened. It's sort of I'm sort of coming at it from not really under like a starting sort of viewpoint where I don't really understand a lot of the taxonomy and stuff like that, and I'm only starting to learn it now. So I understand, why things have been named in a certain way and why things have been changed, as a result. For example, like the southwestern longneck from Perth, originally starting off as oblonga and then being changed to colii when someone else added a description, and trying to meet the guidelines to describing a new species, etc., and things like that. In Australia, there's a few different parties. Wells and Wellington have done a few descriptions. Canner's done a few, and others, and they're not always on this wanting to be on the same page, and they're always looking at it from the same lens. But yeah, I when it comes to that sort of stuff, I'm still sort of in the background, not really, voicing my opinions till I sort of understand it a bit more. But yeah, I do like the idea that we subspeciate things and recognize differences. But yeah, it's, for example, like the NT longneck now described Chelodina crucipongo. That is just sort of a recognition of the NT group of animals. Yeah, I'll grab that one in a second. That recognition of just the end of animals as opposed to all of the others that go down, the rugosa complex that goes down through the Cape and up to the tip of Cape York.
Through the Gulf,
up to the tip of Cape York. But yeah, they I like that they've done that, and I'm we know Greg and a friend in the US had stuff to do with Bill, and as a result, have known about the description of crucipongo that Bill did, and yeah. It's in while I read the descriptions and look at how they differ and how these turtles differ in the NT to the Gulf region or along the Cape. It's looking at photos and things, it's very hard to really see the differences in these things, and I'm sure you guys are aware of the difficulties in all the northern Chelodina in Australia. But yeah, like the main differences being between the NT populations and the Cape and Gulf populations of being eye color and ratios of shell width to length and depth and things like that, and maybe one or two other things, but that's about it. They're sort of the main answers, and to what level do you say is different? I guess the more you're able to explain these differences, the more strong your evidence is, and that physical, when it's not like apparent to the eye, when it's internal, part of the bone structure and things like that. It's hard to really understand from my point of view.
The speciation too in Australia. Sorry.
Yeah, no, keep going.
The speciation of different, like Emydura, where things are getting lumped together, and we already know a lot about them. There's not a real, there's always something we can know about them, ranges, habits, all sorts of things, but we know a lot about them because they're right in our faces. They're where we all live pretty much. The different species up in the north, I'm talking about the subspeciation of the Macquarii more so, but then the controversial things in Australia are Elsea, because we're finding out more about them. Chelodina up in the tropical northern long right down to Perth, because a lot of things are changing there. So yeah, that's where the changes will be in the future with subspeciation or just separate species in those different. It's that's where I can see it happening more. Well, Maya Kelly's the some was called Wallambinia. We won't get into that now. So possibly differences within that range as well. That's going to come out sometime soon too. So yeah, a lot of changes on the board there still, and forever changing.
And what's interesting, going back to the long necks of northern Queensland and stuff, the Rugosa, in Can's book, I'm sure you've seen in the Rugosa section, or the Cape Rugosa section, the drainage. There's quite a lot of variation moving up the Cape, going right till the tip. And there's one turtle, I believe, on the front page of the Rugosa section in the book where that turtle looks a lot like animals from PNG, and that turtle looks a lot different to turtles further south in the Rugosa complex. So whether that might potentially be a Cyber Rocky or whatever the correct name is for those southern New Guinean long necks, but I think personally that there's a lot of variation in this sort of Gulf, in this Cape region of Australia for the Rugosa. And genetically, there was a paper done by Arthur Georges, I believe one of his students, that looked at the genetic differences and percentage differences and things like that. And I don't fully understand a lot of that, but there are quite distinct differences and quite distinct groupings of different drainages and such that genetically they might be distinct to some degree. Like, they are distinct to some degree. Is that enough? Something I don't really know. But yeah, it's interesting, and something I'm gonna read about in the future.
A lot of unknowns in the tropical north of Australia.
Yeah, what doesn't help is accessibility. In some parts of Australia, just so hard to access. It's just like helicopter access is about the only thing that can get you to places, and that comes at a cost.
I mean, it's fascinating, just how much sort of recently has been described, like the Kimberley necks and the Arnhem Land long necks. Those are all pretty recent, and it's. I feel like something interesting. Like, I'm not taxonomy. I think could get overly petty sometimes, and a lot of times it becomes personal attacks, and kind of we start to lose focus of what we're trying to really do here. And I think that we're sort of looking at a snapshot of an organism at this moment in time. So for species, I think we need to look at all the characters we can sort of weigh: morphology, genetics, and then sort of, is this thing millions of years kind of diverged from other things? But there's also something to be said for things that are just kind of minorly different, and those are on their own kind of trajectories evolutionarily, and I think we should preserve that. Classification wise, I'm not, maybe sometimes it shouldn't be species, but some or other level. But then you get to if it's not a species, then funding and government protection tends to be kind of limited, and it's easier just to name something as kind of a unit. It's kind of a question of how much do we divide things, because you could just consistently sort of divide it down. But yeah, I mean, and I think there's this running idea that genetics is just like sort of, I guess, more important than morphology or something, but that's just not the case. I mean, a lot of people seem like it's a more complex process maybe to get the results, but morphology is, when used, I think, correctly and looked at really sort of in a detailed manner, can be just as, if not more, informative to tell you sort of the level of sort of how different something is. I think
it's where division comes up now because of the way people approach turtles. I mean, we've come to it from, picking one up off the road, like 20 years ago or something like that. I shouldn't say that because it's illegal to do that. But you already told the secret. Damn it. But they just is that sirens I hear?
Yeah.
They said the way people approach it. So we've always seen things in the wild, growing up in captivity, whatever. We've always been in rivers. I used to go when I was younger than Terence, I would go surfing on holidays or surfing every day down the beach. We're not far from the beach now. I go on a holiday, we go to a river, so we're around turtles all the time. We never go to the beach, there's too many people. So we see things from that aspect. Well, Terence is seeing things from a scientific point of view now, or getting that way. But I can understand both sides, but people don't seem to be able to work together with it that often, unfortunately. So it's both very essential in the in taxonomy. But yeah, some people don't. We the genetics understand that much, but I just accept what I hear. And then what I hear from some people is, I wonder if they're listening to what
the other guys are saying. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted, mate.
No, I mean, I think that. Oh, Jack, you're going?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
No, I was waiting for you to say something, Michael. I thought you had.
Oh, okay. The issues it's hard to read people's body language on Zoom, but we're trying our best. Yeah, I mean, I think that ego gets in the way in taxonomy, and a lot of times I like to read about it, but more so just because it's like you go through these accounts of kind of skullduggery and people just kind of it's more of an adventure narrative, I guess, than it is maybe not adventure narrative. It's more of kind of a documentation of the history and battles that occur in biology. It's more interesting than people think, but in terms of I think genetics maybe gets this whole it's like more complex than just looking at something, and we think that a lot of people think, oh, it must be more informative, but realistically, when you're doing genetics, you're just kind of looking at more characters, because each sort of base pair you look at is something that's kind of informative in terms of making a taxonomic decision, but you're only getting a snapshot of a process that might not be visible at the surface of the organism, but you don't really know what you're looking at in terms of how it's manifested physically. And realistically, when you look at morphology, you're looking at kind of a catalog of the genetic history, just in all these different areas. So I think in terms of like making decisions based off a few characters, that can be kind of tough, because when did those characters arise becomes the question. But if you have 200, 300 plus different little minute details that hold statistically over a population, I think that there's room there to say with pretty high confidence that genetically that's going to be reflected if we could access the whole genome versus just kind of segments, because we still are sort of in infancy, maybe not infancy, but still kind of limited, I think, in our ability to make inference. But it's one of the biggest questions, I guess, in the 21st century is like on Science Magazine, they've got 100 questions that we need to answer in biology, and what is a species is one of them. Like, you wouldn't expect that to be something, but it is.
Yeah. And we can see that sort of stuff being, played out in the Elsea in Australia, the Elsea labracorum that are now Elsea uniros, as a result of looking at techniques that Josephini has developed, but like computer techniques, looking at the scoot schoolie and how that relates, and how how things line up and the angles of things, and looking at their ratios compared to looking at fossil ratios of things under sort of special technology, and comparing that to alive specimens now, and there's no real genetic basis to any of that, but you're looking at these fossils that are however old they are, 50,000 years old, 50,000-year-old fossils, and as a result are able to differentiate the current species today. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, that story. Yeah, I mean, I guess I've got a question for, I guess, everyone. What is your guys' favorite turtles? That was something we were kind of curious.
Well, Can I actually interject real quick?
Go ahead.
I was saying because before we go down that road, I wanted to bring up the point earlier that I started talking about before we started recording. Was what Scott Thompson told me. This was about 3 years ago now. That he believes or at least at the time, that the pig-nosed turtle is a complex of multiple species with at least one residing in New Guinea and then several more in Australia. But I don't remember specifically what else he said, but he did say that they're morphologically distinct. I've never seen enough of them from knowing where they came from to see anything like that, but I found that really interesting. I've never heard anyone say that since. And I don't think John Ken or anyone said anything about that in the book or mentioned any kind of divergence between them.
The one Australian cryptodire.
Yeah. And unique. Those flippers are just amazing, really. We've got a little one here. The differences, I think, from memory that John's pointed out.
It's not in the book though.
Yeah, it was just the tolerances to salinity and overall size. I think they're the main points.
Oh yeah.
It might be fairly superficial, but they're not that commonly kept in Australia. It's not a real widespread because of the class, like we were talking about before, because of the classes of licensing, availability. They're really one or two people breeding them in Australia.
And what's hard is that a lot of the areas they're found is where saltwater crocs are found. So to look at wild individuals, it's not very easy. You can't just sort of turn up and go for a swim. So you need to have permissions to go and catch things and be affiliated. Most of the time, be affiliated with a group or a body. A target. Do some of that work. It might be his one of his projects at the moment. So it'll be interesting. I want to know about them and
it'd be interesting
to see what comes of it. But yeah,
I'm curious about the size.
Yeah. Even within
if size is a factor.
Yeah.
Then I've seen pictures of some from New Guinea that are absolutely huge, and I don't know if it's just the ones there, but it's often cited they can be over 24 inches in carapace length. So they can be a big turtle, and most of the captive ones I've seen aren't really anywhere near that. They're more like 15 inches or so.
Yeah.
They're crazy too. The video then I think was it David Attenborough maybe showed that I think that was sped up, but they poured water on the eggs and immediately they hatched. I think it was sped up over time, but it's still kind of a cool that they've kind of adapted to.
Yeah.
They just get to that. Their trigger. I assume the same in PNG as being oxygen staff to trigger the hatching. It's amazing.
Yeah, there is a bit of footage circling around of I think Cairns Marine. They bred some and they just plonked an egg into the water, and as soon as it just plonked in the water, it started hatching and coming out, and it swam out. It was amazing. Should share that.
I'm actually the water I guess diapause and hatching, that brings up a question. I know I think you guys have, I think it's not a blonde any. Is it a blonde? Yeah, northern longnecks rugosa.
Oh yeah.
They've been reported to nest underwater, right? Have you guys ever seen that with yours, or is that just kind of a?
I think no, we haven't seen it. They haven't, but they're not old enough yet. This is our biggest girl.
Oh, there you go.
This is a Currichal Pongo. This is the Darwin, which I just still say to Terence, rugosa. You know, I still say that because we're so used to it. But these are my favourite long neck species, by the way. They're a lot of character, scratching bastards of things. I don't know, you know, like, geez, those claws are just savage. But they're very curious, very tough turtles. These are the ones that Indigenous people in tropical northern Australia seek out for food quite often. They're quite a meaty sort of a thing too. But yeah, we haven't seen it. Ours aren't old enough, but other friends of ours who've bred them in captivity have found that like the diapause, well, even with much less of the diapause, they still hatch. I wonder, how do I express this properly? I wonder sometimes if those environmental triggers, the thing, like if that's the more recent years, and they still can lay on land because they lay in the water. These guys, and the eggs will hatch again with that oxygen deprivation. The eggs will hatch supposedly wet season. That's what I know of. But some of the people in captivity don't put the eggs, the adults or the eggs, through that, give them the opportunity to that thing in the final stages of incubation. So that inundation. So and they still seem to be okay. So I want this thing because it's what happens, but they don't necessarily have to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not using all the correct words here, but that's
a lot of the time as well in captivity. We have incubators, and we're taking so much variability out, and that variability might be something that slows down development in wild eggs in these regions. You know, if they've had a diapause at the start of development, does that then, does other conditions, the diurnal sort of temperature changes within the chain, what type of soil, really fine silty soil that gets rock hard, how much does heat penetrate through that, all these things. Perhaps a mechanism to account for these things is slow development and slow growth, and just having that slow growth across this period is beneficial. And then the wet season, the next wet season comes, the trigger, and they hatch out. They seem to have, they seem to be able to hatch under quite variable conditions, with a diapause, without a diapause at the start. But yeah, when it comes to them laying, most of what I've seen has been, underwater laying.
With the hatching too, that like with the piggies or fly rivers, where the eggs are, they'll only hatch when they're oxygen starved due to inundation. A lot of it, possibly with these guys and the areas they live, I'm not refuting what people say, but is it just purely because when it rains, that's the only time they can get out? Like Terence is saying, that silty, muddy layer is rock hard in the off season when it's not the wet season, in the dry. So, here's the rain, we hatch, we can get out, we can get out now. So they might still be able to do that if they don't have that, that silty layer. They might still, they might hatch. They might start hatch. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know.
You need
to know. There's a lot to learn still.
How they, whether they hatch and just sit in that chamber, that soil's too hard, and they just wait for the wet season, or try to do the eggs just sit in like a state of like almost completion and just wait for the rain, and
we're supposed to be answering questions and we're just asking them now.
No, I mean,
it's a great discussion.
Because I feel like it's a lot of unknowns still.
We can learn a lot from the Indigenous people in Northern Australia. That's that avenue of investigation is something that John does well. He spent a lot of time with people up there. And I don't with some of the researchers, I don't know, but I'd like to find out what I could from people up there. There has been a project years past with Rugosa, which we're now up near Darwin, so it's Corycial Pongo, breeding for Indigenous communities for selling of hatchlings to the pet trade. I don't know if that's still going ahead. I have to go back and investigate that, but the amount that those guys would know would be fascinating. There was a brief paper put out by someone who visited, by someone there or someone who visited, which was chock full of information, but very short and concise, but about incubation techniques and the way they did it. I tried to find that recently and I couldn't find it, so I'll just see what I can find. I found it interesting when I read it years ago, but we didn't have these turtles then. I didn't know much about them. Every long neck in the tropical north was a rugosa, you know.
Yeah.
So
Recently,
yeah, that was years ago. We're always learning.
Well, we're back to that classic. We're back now.
Can't escape it.
That's interesting. So they were doing what were the project with the Corycial Pongo, and so it was like community involved, and they'd have certain a number of them they go sell to the pet trade, and then others they introduce, or what was that?
I don't know the outcomes of it. I was more interested in just the incubation techniques and what was happening and how they were getting. They would know a lot because I think they're allowed to catch from the wild. So they were catching gravid females and inducing, and sometimes they were just finding nests, I think. So it wasn't captive bred, so to speak. So, and then, exempt from a lot of permissions that you or I would have to get if we were doing that sort of thing. But it was I think it was a great for them to make, for income and something that they know a lot about. These turtles are very important to the Indigenous Australians, and they knew a lot about them, and it was something they were working with that was familiar to them. So, yeah, it was a good project, I believe. I really don't know much more about what happened to it.
And it's interesting, I think, from memory, there were photographs from that paper of Corycial Pongo that look a lot different to the ones we have, which would have been, originally from around the Darwin area, I gather. And even in the Corycial Pongo description, they sort of state that there are a few groupings that are distinct, especially as you're starting to move east towards Arnhem Land. And so even though we there's such small things are used to speciate, like Corycial Pongo from Rugosa, for example, with the Rugosa, there's still different. It's that distinction of how you see it versus how valid that distinction is or how strong that is. But yeah.
Yeah, that's so we're starting to get on time, and we've got a game that we play at the end here. But I have one more question. But Jack or Jason, or you guys have any more questions? Or
I'm pretty good. I mean, I pretty much got most of the points I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Just real quick before we
go, Jason.
Before we get into like this game, like wanted to ask, like, what are your future plans with turtles? Like, are there more projects you want to take on? Do you want to get into like the conservation side, or just like where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, well, for me, I guess we've done a little bit of work with a few scientists up at a university sort of expressed interest in me working with them, possibly in the future. On what, I don't know. But yeah, there's an option of going down that route potentially. But after doing this master's, I'm considering, or I'm thinking about it a little bit harder. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to turtles in Australia, I kind of get sick of arguments happening with a lot of things, and I kind of just want to be, you know, whether it be helping, you know, looking at new species potentially, or you know, like helping with husbandry or breeding of endangered species, whatever it may be. I want it to sort of be in an environment where everyone can be involved or helping or provide input, because a lot of the time people pick a side or they pick an avenue and they want to, you know, they get defensive, and you know, and they don't want anyone else to have anything to do with it. But you know, that's sort of where issues arise or issues always arise, and you know, it'd be good to sort of whatever I may do in the future, it'd be good to, you know, support a lot of what other people do. To know exactly what I'm going to do is a bit unknown. I guess it's definitely, I'm definitely going to help turtles, whether that be in my own time or as
we enjoy keeping things here. That it's always a thrill. The conservation government, all the conservation project, government-run project. Some privately run things that get permissions, but we see people like us, like myself, particularly I'm a greenkeeper, you know, looking after golf courses and things like that. That's what I so I've got no occasion. They're not really the slightest bit interested in what people like us say. Where I know with you guys over there'd be people involved in conservation projects who have no formal qualification, that your knowledge is used. It's not seen like that here, really. We know a bunch of people here in Australia who are very, very experienced with the turtles, their behaviour, mostly captive environments. When we see some of the things with the breeding projects, I think they might not be doing things really wrong, but they could do it a lot better. They're not them know. They're not interested. So conservation-wise, we can't do anything. I can't do it. Terence has got potential to be involved. They're not taking greenkeepers in most of the government projects, unfortunately. So we just carry on with our. It's gathering knowledge is good fun.
Yeah.
Seeing things with no one can stop us going and having a snorkel and catching things in the wild and observing them, filming them, and that's around you. Get that feeling and think, oh yeah, come on, let's go. It's summer here and it's been busy and COVID shut down, so I haven't been able to do these things. Go out to rivers and have these trips, but there's it's our system works a little bit different to yours over there, and
it's a little harder to just get into conservation here.
Yeah,
they don't let you.
They don't. Yeah,
they don't let you.
Yeah,
licensing won't let you. Quite simply,
there's been a big issue. Mycelius pervasi, particularly in Queensland, where they're native New South Wales, a system in New South Wales, and they've only been allowed to be kept in captivity in Queensland and Victoria and South Australia, I think. Just 3 of Australia's states, but not in New South Wales. And you know, upon contacting to acquire captive individuals, we always get met with
New South Wales.
When we contact New South Wales to ask about them, they just say you'll never be allowed to keep them.
That's
you're never allowed to have them, etc. Keep them as well, and they're considered endangered in the wild. And these are people that keep the turtles and who have a passion for them. About the only people truly would about these animals, spend their own these animals. We know a lot of people that have helped animals that only do it on paid time. And these people are being told to freeze eggs and never breed these animals again in captivity. And it's just the mindset in Australia when it comes from government groups or overarching bodies is, I think, a bit of fear. And they just go, we can't allow people to keep this endangered animal. It's going to cause issues. It's going to, all these issues are going to splinter off from it. And I think it's been shown in many cases that having that thing is perhaps detrimental.
A lot of blanket rules and unwillingness to change old things. And it's funny with that thing, very quickly, I know we have to go. It's only early afternoon for us here. You guys are probably falling asleep. But my wife is Indian. Terence is half Indian. That's why we look so similar. But we have interest in turtles in India too, which is just like another world. That's just our trips to India. We've seen turtles there, but they're only allowed to keep non-endemic, non-native species.
Yeah.
In India, it's bizarre, so they're allowed to have native species there. So a little bit like that with the purvisei in New South Wales. That's what made me think of it anyway.
Right on. Michael, do you have like the thing set up for like the little like closing game that we do, or are you having trouble with that?
No, I'll get it set up now. But that's a good note to end on, I think. And I've still got tons of questions. I think we've all got questions. We'll have to at some point have you guys back on because this has been amazing. It's just been awesome. And
we'll get the other half of the turtles out then.
Yeah. And we've got some kind of bureaucracy here in terms of getting in the way of conservation, but it certainly seems like Australia's also got kind of a similar deal. So we do a little game at the end here where it's a trivia game. I guess I can explain this. And we have a random name generator, and so we spin it once, and the first person that gets picked, they get to come up with 5 questions related to turtles in 2 minutes, and then we spin the wheel one more time, and the second person that gets picked has to answer those 5 questions. And kind of the rules here are that you can't pick something that's like way out of the ballpark that nobody's going to know, but kind of just go and try to pick some obscure stuff. So if you guys want to participate in this, are we
one person or 2 people?
You guys could team up, or you guys could do 2. I mean,
it would make sense. I mean, they could, if they did 2, that might make sense because normally it'd be 5 people because Ken's not here.
That's the only thing.
That would a little father versus son duel. That might. He
tells me what to do now. I used to tell him what to do with turtles. Now he comes home and tells me. He doesn't live next to university, so he comes home and says, "Dad, did you do this? Dad, did you do that? Why did you do this? Why did you do that?"
I guess we could. Okay, so you guys will be a team, and then we're all single here. So you guys want to participate?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'll pull up the name generator, and I'll share my screen so you guys know that that this is not just random. Let me get
rigged
here. So I could definitely. So we've had some good duels in the past, but let me get this window. Hopefully I can do this. I should be able to.
Some questions.
Yeah, okay. I gotta
grab mine here.
I'll look up the answers.
Can everyone see my screen?
We all
I think we all have that book, so like
we all have
Okay, let's keep it Australian turtle related. How about that?
Yeah. There's that would make me pretty vulnerable because there's big gaps in my knowledge when it comes to a lot of I know a lot about foreign parts, but then a lot of it is just like.
Why? What do you have mostly, Jack?
A lot of American turtles and a lot of Asian turtles, but I don't know. Just it's very, a lot of it stems from Australia is such a foreign place to me, and the geography and all of that is different to me. So it's harder to piece things together as compared to like places I'm more familiar with. I have an understanding of the geography and the rivers, but Australia, I'm still getting to learn most of it. I've never even been. My dad was there a couple years ago, but he was in. But
Cool.
Oh, okay. Can
You'll
you guys
have to
see my
come.
screen?
Can see you.
I'd love to go up there at some point.
You see the wheel?
Yeah.
No, I can't see the wheel. But we trust you. Just get a pen, write the names down, and stab it on the page, and we trust you.
He's good.
Let me try one more time. I don't know if it's gonna work. Is the wheel up now?
No.
All right, that's not gonna. Okay, so you guys have no option. You're gonna have to trust me on it. Well, here, how about this?
Why don't you three think up some questions in the time, and we'll try and answer it.
That could be fun, something a bit different. We could.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, we could if we want to sneakily.
You want to do that? All right.
We can text them.
We'll whisper to each other.
Works.
So what's going on? Are we just
a little like United States versus Australia turtle trivia?
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
It's not like cricket. You guys probably don't
you mean
even
like
know what cricket is.
We each question each other? Like you guys question us on something and we question you on something? Like that could work.
5 questions each way, but we rotate every time.
Yeah.
A little volley going.
Yeah. I like the sound of that.
It's a duel. 1 sec, we got to get a little music going, I think.
Questions.
Yeah, I think in general.
All right. Can we all hear it? All right, wait. I got to get 2 minutes. We got 2 minutes to think some stuff up.
Grab the charger.
Do you want me to ask you a question?
No, give him a chance.
This is gonna be brutal.
Oh man,
it's gonna be a massacre. We're all gonna. All right. Are you writing the questions right now, Michael? Or
wait, so how? Okay, are we just doing Australian turtles, or what's the?
No, I'd do anything.
I was thinking.
Okay, anything.
Yeah. All right.
You need to challenge us. We don't know enough about your side.
As I was going to say, what if they asked us about our stuff? We asked about theirs.
Yeah.
I've got a 2-minute timer. We're at 1 minute now, so 1 more minute, I guess. We're all focused. Wow.
Good.
Got 2.
Oh, it's good.
All right, that's time.
Yeah, that's good.
Are we all good? We got 5 questions, I guess, or So how are we gonna do this, Jack? Are we all kind of on a U.S. versus Australia?
Yeah, Michael, did you come up with how many questions you get?
I have 3 because I figured we'd trade off.
Yeah, I put one in the group chat, so whoever wants to read them off, Jack and Michael have access to it.
Jason,
You're lucky I don't look at group chats.
I think, Jason, you should be the guy that's kind of you should read them for us, and then I'll get the music stopped. So now, time for battle.
Damn it.
Let's see.
That's good thinking music.
All right, I sent one to the chat. I think it's pretty good.
Okay, Jason, can you be our designated? Yep, I heard it come through.
Right on. Do you want to send yours in, Michael's?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry. So by now, hopefully Ken. Yeah, I'm not. Hopefully Ken is having a good dinner tonight. Okay, yeah, this is good. Okay. What? Jack sent, so boys, what are we thinking? I like it.
That's yeah.
Okay, I'm going to send my...
Do we have to guess what you're thinking?
Oh,
That's the question, is what is Michael up to right now?
Okay, so that's 4, I guess. All right. If we need a 5th, we'll get... All right, so Jason, you should have all my...
Yeah,
Right
we
on.
might have 5.
Okay, it might work out then.
All right, who's starting us off? I think the guests need to go first.
Okay, you go with yours.
Okay, what can you guys name 3 different genera in Australian turtles that exhibit cloacal respiration?
Oh, that's a good question.
that's a good question.
I've got 2 right off the bat.
There's more than 3, but we only want 3.
Okay, can I drop my 2 and then...
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Michael.
Drop your 2, Michael. I think
Okay, so the Mary River turtle, Elusor macrurus, and then the Fitzroy River turtle, Rheodites leucops, which we spoke about early on. As far as I've got a guess. I know, but I'll let the other guys think about this one.
I'm trying to think of it right now.
I've got a guess based on similarity of appearance, and I'm just trying to think. So just genre though, not species. Just
Yeah, they're usually quite similar across the species within that genus. Yeah.
So what 2 we have so far? Elusor and
Rheodites.
would it be in Myukeles or?
That's it. That's one of them.
Hey.
All right, we got
All right.
Yeah.
I was thinking
The other one is Elsea. If that's what you're
Oh
thinking of.
man, I didn't.
So
I
those
was thinking
snappers-
white-throated snapper. Yeah, that's what I
Should
was
have been
thinking.
like the first one.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Jason, you want to?
Well done.
Yeah. So the first question, what's the genus name for North American map turtles?
Whoa.
Map turtles.
Is that? I'm just gonna guess. Graptemes?
Yeah,
Got it.
No.
You got it.
Is that it?
1-1.
No way.
Yeah, yeah.
You got it.
All right, next one.
That was just the first name that popped into my head. Mine's sort of like a two-parter. when Chelodina longicollis first hatch, what color are the hatchlings typically on their when they hatch? They typically two colors. What are those two colors? And then at what age would you say they start to change to the colors that are more reflective in adults?
Oh, that's another good one.
Yeah.
That might be.
Okay, colors in terms of like. Okay, I've got.
Plastron.
Think of
Plastron colors.
Yeah. All right. The first, well, so they're kind of like
the two colors.
They're kind of black and orange reddish.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
that's it.
And then the other question was when do they change?
Yeah, when do you start seeing that trend? What they look like there in that Dad's holding up with the black and the orange to help when they're adults with the white plastron and the black lines.
Jack or Jason, you want to take this? I've got an idea, but I'm not.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea, Jack? I've got one, but it's like pretty general.
Yeah, I've got a general idea, but I've got a specific.
I mean, part of my idea is that it's not necessary. My idea is that it is general. I don't know if that makes sense.
Here, Jack, how about you take this one then? Since it sounds like
Jack's got it.
Wait, what?
we just volunteered you to answer the second part of the question.
You volunteered me to answer. All right. You put me on the spot, bro. I'm not sure. You're gonna have to.
You can't just say that.
You gotta try. You gotta try.
Were you still talking about the exact same part? What age?
Yeah.
You pretty much answered this question with Simone.
Like sexual maturity, or after like I don't know 5 to 10 years of age, somewhere in that time.
Good guess. Not quite correct, but I can actually show you.
Okay.
So we have, and you can see the color is starting to fade. It's actually less obvious. He looks a lot blacker on the computer. But that's how they change within.
Got water in.
Yeah.
You're gonna.
That's a change within 1 year, and that change will slowly become greater and greater across the next year, and it should become completely white within the next, say, year old. They start to get that full white plastron with the sutures,
Black delineations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I can see that.
I was gonna guess like
Hit
3
us
to
with
5
a question.
years.
That's kind of similar. That's kind of similar to the mud turtles over here, like the eastern mud turtles. They have like a bright red, like orange on their plastron, but once they start to grow, it dissipates quickly.
All right. So the second question, keep things rolling here. How many species of turtle are there overall?
Oh,
We might have got him.
Yeah.
This will be, yes.
325.
340.
Who's closer?
I have no idea.
What was the first one?
325, I said.
Okay, so I think we have to make a judgment on here. I might be willing to give that half a point because it wasn't like exact, but the 340 was really close.
That was really cool.
So the latest assessment, I believe, is 358. So 340 is it's 18 off. It's not exact, but it's close enough that you guys think a half point's fair.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, did you write that question yesterday or today? Because it's changed in Australia.
That's actually a good point between within a few. So It might be more. Yeah, 3. Yeah. I'll give a half point for that.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers.
All right. Time for
Another one.
we're tied up here.
They actually got us by half a point. So.
No, well, okay. I give ourselves a half because we answered half of the.
Yeah. You can have.
Okay, gotcha. Seems fair.
Yeah.
All right.
I've got one. What is Australia's largest?
Is that Chelodina expansa?
Got it.
Right,
Too easy.
I can tell you the size.
It's like
480 millimeters, right?
yeah, something like
Yeah.
is that something like
Yeah.
it's like or something crazy like it's huge.
All right.
Sorry?
Our third question for you guys: what's the largest non-marine / non-tortoise turtle?
It's
Non-marine.
That's confirmed. It's not. There's one that's.
The Vietnamese. What's its name? I'll know it when I hear it.
I think we know what you're talking
The Vietnamese.
Yeah, I just
soft
can't
shell.
think of the name. I see. Left. Am I on the right track?
Vibrani?
No, I don't think it's
No.
no.
I can't remember.
Well, is a
Got
common
us.
name good enough?
Yeah.
Vietnamese soft shell turtle.
Yeah.
So I wrote this question. I was thinking narrow-headed soft-shell turtle.
That's it.
Is
Yeah.
the largest confirmed. I think you guys were thinking Rapidus, the Yangtze giant soft-shell.
Wait a
So-
second.
Right.
Yeah.
Hold up. They've confirmed. This is a bit random, but if they've confirmed narrow-headed soft shells over like the 340-pound range, because I know Rapidus have been confirmed, or like the Vietnamese giants have been confirmed over 340 pounds. There's anecdotal for higher, but I mean confirmed.
350 was supposedly
That's about 140 kilos or something, kilograms or something.
That's kind of shaky, I guess.
There are records
Rapidus
there's a record in Pritchard's book of 392-pound Rapidus.
But I think that was that big one that they took. That was the one that was in Hohen Keem, I think. And that
Did they get the point, or
that was a different one.
It was from a swamp.
I don't think there's any points awarded there because
No.
So that was our final question.
Yeah. We need to think. We need to think of one other.
I didn't think we'd get this far. Like a penalty shootout. I thought we might get knocked out earlier.
Well, right now I believe we're up by 1. So if you want to just take the L and we can go about our days and nights. We could.
Yeah, you win the penalty shootout.
Yeah.
You just take your shirt off and run around the field.
Yeah.
USA won. Next time we'll see.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
Actually, wait.
No worries.
We have one question. We put up a question sticker. We went super long, but I don't know. So Terrapin Studios asked on our Instagram if you guys know what species of toxic beetle juvenile Parker's snake necks are said to mimic. That's kind of a specific question.
Wow.
Terence knows more about the Papuan long-necked species than I do. I haven't spent that much time reading up on them.
In terms of the Parker, it's a very, 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 very unique question. It's and how they mimic it. I gather that they're talking about the vermiculation on the head.
In the look.
But yeah, it's that species of turtle is amazing. That one, the Parker eye, and as I sort of mentioned before, that that one turtle in John's book on the rig is actually has quite a bit of vermiculation and a light sort of backing to the head, and I've wondered before whether that's somewhat related to the parkeri up there, but yeah,
We'll try and find out.
we'll try and find out about this this beetle. Definitely something I can read about at university. So yeah, we'll have to get back to them on that one.
It sounds like it's some form of maybe Batesian mimicry, where you have a non-toxic animal mimicking something that's toxic. But yeah, it's a good question. From Hairpin. Yeah, so that's something we'll have to answer at a future point, but it's stumped all of us. So I don't know.
Even if they want to send me a message on my Instagram, I'd be happy to follow up.
And we'll link you guys. We'll link your Instagram and Facebook in the description as well, so people have access and know where to contact.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well,
Cool.
I guess I can just wrap us up, and but thank you, Andrew and Terence. It's been amazing to talk to you guys and just kind of pick your brains on a group of turtles that we definitely don't hear as much about, and just to hear about some of the updates and everything. I mean, it's incredible. So just to get some of this knowledge, I learned a ton. I think I speak for all of us. So at some point we'll have to have you guys back on if you're interested, but this is just amazing. So thank you guys so much.
If you can squeeze in another 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on for, I think, days, honestly. It's just been awesome. But I think that it's getting late for these guys, and you guys are on a whole different season.
In the morning.
Yeah. You guys are on a whole different season. I forget that. We're in winter, and that's summer, I think. So
Get out at work this morning.
Oh, man.
Terence has got one thing to show you before we go.
A departing
surprise.
Is our Elsa.
Nice.
Oh, there we go. We didn't even have time to talk about Erwin's.
God dang.
We didn't.
I know.
Wow.
Not enough hours in the day, I guess.
Yeah.
I've seen the skull of one, but
we've had this one since baby too. It's been living outside.
You can see
for
that
quite a few years now.
The head is slowly turning white.
That's
female.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's fast. That's amazing. And I guess Bill McCord probably has one, but that's maybe the only one here. I don't know. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a whole story, but I think we'll have to talk about that another time. But it's just been awesome. Thank you guys for coming on, and I'm sure
Thanks
it's
for taking like that 2 hours and 12
you.
minutes out of your day to
That
talk
was
turtles with us.
Happily.
It was worth missing the Super Bowl. I think I speak on all of our.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
we think so too.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks.
Take care.
See ya.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.